lastly, within this vegan reversal that we're seeing in beauty, there's also innovations more related to the longevity economy. So this is where, things like collagen have really been leading innovations, and people are very eager to compromise their veganism in order to get the most efficacious results, kind of like looking for anything and everything to make them look younger. And there was quite an extreme example of that. Talking about protein beauty, it was a skincare brand based in the US that I found, who are using human fat stem cells that are donated by plastic surgery patients, and they kind of process them, purify them, and add them back into their skincare serum.
That is Pia Fisher, Senior Beauty Strategist at WGSN. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Create Tomorrow podcast. I'm your host, Cassandra Napoli, Head of Marketing, Events, and Culture Forecasting at WGSN. Every 2 weeks, I will take you on a journey to examine how brands and consumers are creating tomorrow, whether that's through product innovations, actions and strategies, or online behaviors. In this episode, we'll hear from Pia Fisher, Senior Beauty Strategist at WGSN, and Katharine Schub, Food and Drink Strategist at WGSN, who will help me understand what's been dubbed the vegan reversal in food, drink, and beauty, as consumers crave protein and animal-derived ingredients become the focus across those categories. Pia, we'll come to you first. Can you tell us who you are and what you do at WGSN?
Well, I'm Pia Fisher, and I work on WGSN's beauty team. I'm a senior strategist here.
Nice. And what about you, Katharine?
Hi, I'm a strategist on the food and drink team based in New York.
So, Katharine, I'm going to come to you first. You recently wrote a forecast called Animal-Based, and it's for 2026 and 2027. And you've highlighted how meat and dairy are being redefined as rustic, unprocessed, and unfussy with inherent health properties, which are now markers of wellness and slow living. Across social media, things like carnivore, #carnivore has been rising. Conventional meat and dairy sales increased in 2024, while US dollar sales of plant-based meat and seafood has actually decreased. I'm really interested in this because I've been here for about 10 years at WGSN. We were obsessed with calling everything, vegan beauty, vegan diets. This was plant-based diets were trending for years. And it seems like the pendulum has really swung in the other direction at this point, to the extreme where everything is sort of animal-based now. Can you tell us a little bit about this shift? Why has it emerged? And why are we obsessed with animal-based diets all of a sudden?
While there's been this shift, I also want to point out that they do coexist, and the plant-based market is still obviously huge, but consumers, myself included, eat meat but prefer certain plant-based products and vice versa. So whether it's getting really into cottage cheese desserts and also drinking oat milk lattes, there's quite a bit of toe dipping into different lifestyles. I don't know if you've heard of this brand called Smearcase. It's this cottage cheese ice cream. It's delicious. I had it at the fancy food show in New York City. And I think it's a good example of eating protein and cottage cheese, not just for health. It's very indulgent. There's sugar in this stuff. But, you know, it also kind of brings me to the question, like, why are these two ways of eating, plant-based and animal, being pitted against each other? And I find this interesting because these two movements have such similar roots. So I'm going to go back to the 1960s, 70s in the US. And this also is a movement that happened globally. But we think about the back to the land movement, which encouraged people to leave cities and move to rural areas and be more self-sufficient and simple. And this also included the adoption of vegetarianism. And so if we look at why many consumers today are consuming more meat, a lot of it has to do with this preconceived notion of tradition. And so we've seen this transition from the low-carb diets of the 90s, like the Atkins diet, to the less strict keto regimen, to the carnivore diet, which actually excludes vegetables, fruits, grains, and nuts, and plants are actually seen as toxic, which is really interesting. And so there's been this kind of reversal of the conversation around what is healthy. Actually, my whole feed is unfortunately filled with kind of mommy creators filming what they what they feed their kids. And there's this big movement within beta and alpha diets around myself, a millennial, and the narrative when I was a kid is eat your greens, eat your vegetables. And now the narrative for kids is bone marrow, meat stock, all of these things. So they're, for gut health, for immunity. So it's really starting from a very young age now. It's not eat your greens. It's sweetie, eat your bone marrow.
I talked about that on the Betas podcast with Claire from Food and Drink, and she was saying that I think she gives her child venison, and that is sort of become normalized. It's like I don't know, like a baby food kind of packet. She was saying,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's maybe not venison, it's some bison. That's what it is.
Oh, yeah,
She gives her
bison.
baby some
Yes. I know that brand.
bison. Yeah. And yeah, I think that's so interesting, that shift from eat your vegetables to eat your meat, eat your protein. That's totally true. I'm not a mom, so I don't necessarily see it in that context, but I see it with myself.
I'm not a mum.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a mum either, but I'm a dog mum.
Ah.
I actually have the same shift where I've started feeding my dog bone marrow and bone broth. I mean, she is my baby. So I feed her bone broth in her meals now as well because it's apparently really good for her paws and her claws and her fur.
Oh, this is interesting. I'm going to go down a rabbit hole for my dog later, probably. I want to talk about the interest and the growing interest in primal diets, how many consumers are reverting back to ancestral ways of eating, with interest in hashtag primal diet up 443% on TikTok over the last 2 years. I want to know what's driving this trend in reverting back to primal eating, and maybe what sorts of foods does that entail, and how are brands getting involved here?
Yeah, so it's funny because there's this narrative that the primal way of eating is centered on meat, but many civilizations mainly had a vegan diet, with animal protein being more incidental. The birth of agriculture is deeply intertwined with the domestication of animals, but I'm not so sure that consumers will ever be hunting their food. But again, being dissatisfied with conventional approaches, whether it be medicine or weight loss, meat and its attachment to the primal diet, or paleo, also called paleo diet, is kind of a shortcut to health in some better way. And in the end, consumers are really going to social media for this kind of ancestral wisdom. And we think about brands using the word ancestral to kind of market their products. I saw a product recently. It was a ancestral blend. You've probably seen this, Cassandra. And it has added beef liver and heart. So I'm talking just specifically in North America. Ancestral in the context of meat eating is really like adding in liver or organ meats. These ingredients that are now being added in small doses, because of prices, will most likely also become more center of the plate because they're offcuts. And I know we've been talking about this for a long time, but if consumers are going to be more invested in meat eating, they're going to have to eat these products. It can't just be in small doses, because who can afford it to eat a ribeye every night?
Pia, I want to come to you now and tap into the beauty aspect of it all. So, what initially piqued my interest about this conversation was I was seeing a lot of products being touted on social media with beef tallow, whether that's food products or increasingly beauty products. I think it was being called like nature's Botox or something like that. It could cure your acne, it could cure your scarring by just rubbing some beef tallow on your face. Apparently, it has a quite a meaty smell to it. So I don't know how alluring that is for some listeners, but you have a background in cosmetic science. So I think you are the perfect person here to ask about this. You wrote an ingredient forecast for 2027, and you said that we should expect to see high protein beauty, where new priorities will see ingredients undergo a vegan reversal as quality, cruelty-free, animal-derived ingredients become the focus. Can you unpack this a little bit for us?
Yeah, and I also have seen the beef tallow skincare trend kind of on my social media, and I don't want to rain on your parade, but I'm not totally convinced that it is this miracle, can cure acne and scarring. And actually, I know that in some markets it's not really regulated for cosmetics, so there's a lot of people in the industry kind of saying that there might be actually some risks to it, like maybe it could irritate your skin. But it is rich in something called linoleic acid, which is said to kind of work as a mild anti-inflammatory. So there is some science behind it, but I don't think it's this kind of miracle ingredient that we all want to find one day to make our skin look incredible, no matter how meaty it smells. But kind of back to the trend of it all and high protein beauty ingredients, it's definitely something that we're seeing come through on beauty as well. So that's things like, yes, your beef tallow, but also lots of other ingredients, kind of animal derived ingredients. So things like colostrum. We're seeing a resurgence in materials that come from bees. So things like royal jelly, beeswax. It's been used in cosmetics for years, and it's kind of coming back into formulations. And then I guess kind of one of the biggest ones of the last couple of years is collagen. So all of these are kind of uptrending in beauty. And then actually a really interesting thing as part of that research for the ingredients forecast for 2027, I know you guys know about it, but I think it's incredible, part of our job that we get to use social listening tools quite a lot. And for that ingredients forecast, I used our early signal score. So it basically like looks at a trend and if it's going to take off from a very early stage. And that's where we did see a really high engagement for both beef tallow and then for goat milk as well in beauty.
What sorts of products are you seeing in that space right now?
I mean, all sorts. I feel like milk in general is a huge trend that's coming through, even just as a texture. Everyone seems to be obsessed with dairy products. So we've got like your milk toners. And then I also just saw actually on our TikTok analytics that hashtag butterskin was coming back in. So it's being used, yes, as an ingredient, but also kind of as an aspirational skin finish and product format as well.
Yeah, I think butter sounds a bit better than tallow for me. I don't know. The whole idea of like a meaty smell
Yeah.
is really kind of creepy to me, but I digress. Katharine, are you seeing beef tallow in a lot of food packaged products? So, for example, I was at a health food store recently and I was in the chip aisle because I do love a chip. And there was a brand called Masa and it's made with beef tallow instead of, seed oils and things like that. And so to me, that screamed health. Is that accurate?
Yeah, there are so many. I mean, not so many, but more convenient snack products that are using tallow. And just as beef tallow is not so appealing on the face, a lot of snack brands are adapting their products to be made with tallow or any, other rendered animal fat. So we're going to see more products made with schmaltz or chicken fat or lard because these products, they're seen as traditional. They theoretically could make them. I don't know if you'd want your house to smell like that, but you could make them unlike a refined vegetable oil, which is a little harder to to boil down in large quantities in your house. And just like Pia mentioned, that tallow has the linoleic acid, which is good for your skin. Tallow also has, I mean, many benefits, but also stearic acid, which it appears to not raise cholesterol in the same way that other saturated fats do. So there are health benefits and feels better and more holistic than, say, frying your French fries or your chips in peanut oil. There's actually a new fast casual chain where I live in the Hudson Valley called Tallow. I haven't been yet, but I want to visit. And they on their menu it just says tallow fries, which is really interesting. And they're also selling smash burgers made with meat from local regenerative farms. So it's kind of one and the same. And there's definitely in the food space a health halo around beef tallow.
Pia, on Insight, we've been talking about how consumers are more in control than ever before. And you highlighted a great example when you said that Glossier received backlash when it removed lanolin from its Balm.com formula to make it vegan. And then in 2024, it actually reversed the decision. So I'm wondering, have you seen any other brands shift and roll back on their vegan formulas recently to align with the times, to align with more animal-based product ingredients?
I do think Glossier is just the best example of a brand doing this and doing it in such a public way. I don't know if you saw the video that they did on their socials when they reversed it. It was really funny. I think they called it something like comment section read by Glossier HQ, and they literally got people in the head office to just read out the comments. And there was some like really rude ones about the vegan formulation. But also other ones where people were just like, I'm begging on my hands and knees, please bring back the original formulation. And so this was a really clear example of a brand listening to their consumers and kind of reversing it quite openly. I know that they do offer both the vegan and the non-vegan formulation, which is kind of interesting. They've got something for everyone there. And I don't really think there's many other brands that have backpedaled so obviously in beauty, but there definitely does seem to be a movement of brands kind of leaning more into their animal-derived ingredients as part of their USP. And we've kind of noticed that there seems to be three main areas that's kind of driving this change. So there's this desire for kind of safe, clean products and clean beauty. It's kind of having a bit of a resurgence, and it sounds like there's something similar going on in food and drink as well. So this kind of idea that if something is good enough to eat, then it's good enough to put on your face. So you've got those ingredients like beef tallow that are seen as really biocompatible with your skin. Then there's also kind of a resurgence in ancient wellness practices, so things like Ayurveda, also something called apitherapy, which I learned about the other day, which is a medicinal practice that is kind of based on bee-derived ingredients. And consumers really are responding to this ancestral knowledge, reinterpreted for kind of more modern skincare. And these are practices that all have thousands of years of history and safety behind them, which is why they're appealing so much. There's an Indian brand actually talking about the Ayurvedic skincare. They're called Nat Habit, and they create creams featuring, they kind of have raw milk and ghee in these creams, and they make them to order in their skincare kitchen, which is pretty cool. And then kind of lastly, within this vegan reversal that we're seeing in beauty, there's also innovations more related to the longevity economy. So this is where, things like collagen have really been leading innovations, and people are very eager to compromise their veganism in order to get the most efficacious results, kind of like looking for anything and everything to make them look younger. And there was quite an extreme example of that. Talking about protein beauty, it was a skincare brand based in the US that I found, who are using human fat stem cells that are donated by plastic surgery patients, and they kind of process them, purify them, and add them back into their skincare serum. I think that was Angela Caglia, I think is how you say the brand name. So it is kind of coming from all different directions, like this demand for clean beauty, this kind of ancient wellness practices, and then also these longevity ingredients that are seen as really effective. They're kind of the whole spectrum of drivers for this.
Yeah. Um, what does this all mean though? So if a brand is vegan, if a beauty brand is vegan and consumers don't necessarily want that, are they going to change, or do you think that there's space for everyone? Kind of like what we were saying in the food and drink space, that there will be, more plant-based diets, there will be more animal-based diets, and people are kind of flexing and bumping or bouncing between the two. Is that the same in beauty?
Yeah, definitely. We always say, kind of when we're speaking to our clients, that there's no point trying to be everything to everyone. It just doesn't work. And that's particularly true in beauty, where the market is just so saturated. We know that consumers just want brands that speak to them in particular. They want to be able to shop their own values, and they are looking for beauty brands that fulfill kind of a wider part of their own identity. And this is the same for kind of protein beauty as well. So not every brand needs to completely reverse their identity for every single trend. And when we're looking at kind of the drivers for the trend, for protein beauty, it's about kind of finding comfort and tradition, about slow living, about nature. And it's really important that brands look at their consumer persona and really see if this is something that will speak to them. So for many brands, for many consumers, thoughtfully considered animal-derived ingredients will really appeal for all of those reasons I've spoken about. But for others, like, many will still be choosing to follow a vegan lifestyle, and seeking vegan beauty products will be part of that. And then I know we kind of touched on sustainability within food, but this is a conversation that's still really important in beauty. it's kind of becoming more nuanced in beauty. I think there was kind of this perception before that natural or vegan meant more sustainable. And for many ingredients, that kind of isn't always the case. It's kind of a case by case basis, and some consumers are more willing to kind of delve into a bit of the detail of what that means. So there's some companies that are kind of looking at upcycled animal-derived ingredients to kind of speak to the sustainability piece as well. So, for example, I think there's lots of collagen that people say is a byproduct of the meat industry, and then there's also, I think, a glycoprotein that you can get from crushing up crab shells, which is apparently really good for your skin as well. But I guess also it really depends on what market you're in and which region. So we did some research recently that LATAM and North America, for example, have the highest rate of decline in mentions of veganism on social media. So maybe particularly if you're in that market, that might be something to consider more carefully.
Interesting. I want to talk lastly about some of the wackier ingredients that you've potentially input in your reports and talked about. Famously, the one that's gone viral on social media is the salmon sperm facial. Can you talk a little bit about the wackier sounding ingredients within the beauty or high protein beauty space?
Yeah, so these ones definitely fall into that kind of longevity space, and this is actually where region is really important. So, APAC, for example, never quite had the same adoption of vegan lifestyles. There was some, but it wasn't the same as what we saw in kind of Europe and North America. And so, kind of the ingredient innovation for longevity ingredients has kind of continued in this time. And that's where we're seeing things like PDRN, which is the salmon sperm, really come to the fore, and that's coming from the medical aesthetic space. So you can get it kind of injected under your eyes, and it's supposed to improve skin tone and texture. I think there's lots of animal-derived ingredients that are traditional in Chinese medicine. So placenta was kind of earmarked as an ingredient to watch, and it featured quite heavily in Beauty World Japan. And there was my colleague was telling me about, she went to the show, this brand that had a placenta base in all of their products. It was called Dr. Select, and that was actually derived from domestic pig farms. And I think that's a very hyper-specific example. I don't think it's something that we will see kind of across all regions, but it is interesting to see how this is innovating and coming into ingredient innovations that are coming into the market.
Amazing. As always, I ask each of my guests to highlight someone that they think is creating a new version of tomorrow that's deeply inspiring to them. It could be a person, it could be a brand. Who might you select? Pia, we'll go to you first.
I was thinking about this, and it might be recency bias, but I went to this sun protection conference, which is like my Disneyland. I loved it. And there was this brand there that did a talk. They were called Don't Ignore Cancer. There is a sun care brand, British sun care brand. And the stats that they had on men, it specifically not wearing sun cream, were wild. So they had something like 37% of men in the UK aren't using sun protection. Men are 69% more likely to die from skin cancer. So they've created and marketed this amazing sunscreen specifically for men. And what makes them really stand out and why I remembered them was their really playful and like quite clever approach. So I don't know if you have noticed, but Don't Ignore Cancer is DIC or Dick, and they've really cleverly, quite cheekily integrated this into their marketing. So they have taglines like "Be a clever dick" and "Get your dick out" and "Got the sun cream out." And they've got, I think their email address was something like don'tbeadick.co.uk. And it's really funny and it's a really great message. And I love how that they're using things like humor to disarm, to connect, and to educate with their consumers. And I think they're doing an amazing job.
Sounds like I should have them on the podcast.
Yeah.
Katharine, what do you think?
So I've had this idea of clean in my mind for a while. And as I mentioned, I was recently at the Summer Fancy Food Show in New York, and I met the founder of this brand, Chica Chica, and they have a product that's a really interesting confluence of clean eating and minimalism with tradition. So they make these, when you go to an Indian restaurant and you have the bowl of fennel seeds at the end of the meal, and they're usually candy coated. They make this product where they actually sweeten the fennel seeds with maple syrup, and they use naturally derived colors, and they're packaged in this beautiful, like, it looks like a piece of jewelry, this little tin. And they were just very passionate about this product. Just, the idea of we don't want to lose tradition in the face of Western ideals of clean eating and clean living. So I thought it was just like a great example of a brand kind of sticking to their guns and not kind of whitewashing themselves, but also, moving the culture forward and also having this kind of message. We're not just designing this for everyone else, but also for us because we want to be healthier. And so, yeah, taking this kind of taking tradition, but putting it through the lens of kind of healthier on trend ingredients.
Thank you to my guests, Pia Fisher, Senior Beauty Strategist at WGSN, and Katharine Schub, Food and Drink Strategist at WGSN. If you're a WGSN subscriber, look out for more trends at WGSN.com. And if you're not a subscriber, please come and discover our services. We'll be back with our next episode soon. In the meantime, you can catch the CEO of WGSN, Carla Buzashi, next week on our other podcast, Lies of Tomorrow. I'm your host, Cassandra Napoli. Be sure to follow and subscribe to this podcast, and see you next time.